Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Well, it's game day. I don't know what more else there is to be said. Time to show up, time to do that thing. I'm going to start with this. I don't have a clearly laid out format or whatever. I do want to talk about the Rodgers situation because that's hilarious, but just because it's fresh in my head, let's just start with it. I don't know why my mind immediately just went to these things. I just kind of thinking through scenarios and everything else. I definitely envision a scenario, especially with the people on the more far end of the negative spectrum, in which there's basically nothing the Packers could do that would be impressive or good. Obviously, if you lose, you're a piece of garbage. If you win barely, that's beyond embarrassing. But even if you win kind of big, I mean, if we're talking like 60-0, then okay, you probably get excited about it. But you know, if it's a 10-point win or something to that effect, the question of, is this actually a good team? I think there's a large portion of the fan base that kind of will refuse to put them in the good column based on the situation with the injuries of the 49ers, basically no matter what. And I kind of want to just reiterate a few things that I've already said. First of all, if you're going to play that game, you have to play that game evenly and across the board. You cannot say we're not as good as the Lions when the Lions have been beating the crap out of bad teams all year. You can't say that about the Vikings, who have been beating up on bad teams most of the year. You can't even. There's not a single team that has mostly played good teams. I mean, look at the Kansas City Chiefs. They beat up on a bunch of bad teams. They go up against an actual good team like the Buffalo Bills, and what happened? They lost. So are they a bad team? Does that mean they're bad? Is that the final test? Is that the ultimate? We know they're not bad. So there needs to be, we need to be fair to our own team. And I'm talking primarily, to the people at the far end of the negative spectrum. If you're going to apply this standard to the Packers, you better apply it to every single team. And the problem you're going to find is that every single team is going to fail your test. So what I'm saying is, there's a reason why, and I've been saying this about the Lions pretty much all year, as much as I want to critique them and say, oh, they're not actually that good. You can't say that about what are they, 9-1? You can't say that about a 9-1 team. You just can't. I don't care how bad the team is. First of all, bad teams lose to bad teams. So even if they're playing bad teams, if they were bad, they wouldn't have that record. But even fairly good teams will very oftentimes lose occasionally to mediocre, to other good teams, to bad teams. It says something in and of itself to have a good record. It does. There is some level of having a high-quality organization that does that, and we've seen that on the opposite side of things with especially the New York Jets. Rodgers, as much as you want to say he's not playing well, he's had many games where he's played at a high level. Some of them terrible, but some of them very good. Devontae's still a good receiver. Garrett Wilson's still a good receiver. They've done some things to upgrade the offensive line. Their defense has been, top 10, top 5 for a very long time. They can't find a way to win. It's not because they aren't a quote-unquote good or talented team. It's that they can't find ways to actually convert that into wins. The Packers have done a good job of finding ways to convert that into wins. The bottom line is, and let me pull this up here. So PFF posted this, and I don't think it's an exact science, but how you run the math on this. But they posted teams with the most at stake in Week 12, and the Packers have been on this list pretty much every single week. The Packers are at the top. There is a 30-point swing depending on a win or a loss. If the Packers win, they go to 90%. If they lose, they drop to 60. So it's an important game. But the point that I'm making at this point is that if we win, we now have a phenomenal record, one of the best we've had through this point. If you look at over the last 10 years or something, and are 90% likely to get into the playoffs. I'm sorry, that's just not something bad teams are able to do. They're just not capable of it. Do the Packers have problems? Sure they do, just like every team has problems. Things are not really working the way that you wish that they were working. There have been, that's not even true. That's a lie. I was going to say there have been times where as a Packer fan you say, man, everything's really humming. That's not true. We've been more optimistic, mostly because we're offensively focused. If the offense is humming, we feel like we got a great team, except for, the defense and special teams isn't great. But man, we're a great team. We could win the Super Bowl. We could win it all. We don't focus on those issues for whatever reason. So there is absolutely reason to be excited. Now, if we lose, that's clearly a problem, right? We should have beat a team that doesn't have all these things, et cetera, and we're down to 60% chance, which we're getting close to a coin flip, so we got to really step it up. Beyond that, with a win, even a close win, even a bad win, whatever, we take the 49ers from having if they would have won 53% chance, so more than likely, they're down to a 15% chance if they lose. It's a big deal. A win is a big deal no matter how we come across it. So I think the way we should approach this game is get as fired up as you could possibly get. Whatever it is that you need to get on your lucky underwear, put on your lucky hat, do your lucky dance, whatever it is, we got to come in full force, full throat behind the Green Bay Packers and prepare for an absolute dogfight and scrap and claw and just butcher your way through this to a win. Expect it. Expect it to be difficult. Expect it to be frustrating. Expect it to be an absolute fight. Expect it to feel like a playoff game. And if you win, feel as though it's a playoff game, because that's at the end of the day, when you get this late in the season, we're kind of talking playoffs. It's not instant elimination, but you get to the point where teams are beginning to get eliminated and other teams are starting to get locked in to the official race. But if you're a team like the Packers, you are fighting. This is officially playoff time. The 49ers, this is a playoff game. We're talking a win is 53% chance you're in and a loss is 15%. You go from probably to really unlikely. It's a big game, right? Forget what we said last week about the Bears. And I know I already started down that road. Scrap that. Screw that. Forget that. Full reverse. We're not playing we better blow them out, otherwise you're a piece of crap game. I don't care. It's Kyle Shanahan. It's the 49ers. It's largely a team that we faced before. It's a team we've struggled with. We struggle beating their defensive schemes and all that kind of stuff. We struggle with a lot of things involving the 49ers, their offense and their defense. It's always a fight. It's always a battle. Kyle Shanahan is a very, very smart man. He's got one hand tied behind his back. That's true. And he's going to have a hard time trying to figure out how to take the limited skills that the guys that he does have has and apply that to his offense to make it beat the Green Bay Packers. But it's not impossible, and we have to assume he's going to come up with the absolute best possible plan to be able to do that. And we have to stop that. That's what this is. This is not some terrible beat-up garbage, JV freaking middle school garbage football team. This is not Pee Wee football. These are professional football players. It's a playoff game. It's a dogfight. All right, now that we've established that, I want to cover this because it's hilarious. That's why. So the Jets thing, I mean, we talked about the Jets as a joke, and then the Bears were a joke, so we talked about them. And then the Giants became a joke, and then it's like they're competing for all the attention for being the dumbest. And the Giants took the spotlight, and the Jets are like, hold up. Granted, you can't necessarily blame them because apparently this is a leaked report or some kind of nonsense, but... Anyways, so who was this? This is this Rossini? Yeah, Diana Rossini. If I'm not mistaken, isn't she the one that leaked stuff, or didn't leak it, but somebody leaked to her, and she was early on when Rodgers was going to the Jets about him having a list, and Rodgers was pissed about it. So I don't know, you take it with a grain of salt or whatever, but people in that Jets organization are leaking like crazy. You can't blame Rossini because she's not lying. If somebody's lying, it's the staff. It's probably the coaching staff. It seems like it's coming from a lot of the coaches. Just lots of just craziness going on. But here is the latest. I'm just going to highlight the key points from the article without reading through it. Okay, ready? Jets owner Woody Johnson reportedly lost confidence in Rodgers' ability to lead the team to the playoffs. Now, we kind of knew this. There was a report before, I think by Rossini. I don't know. Don't remember. But the report was essentially by week 4, Woody Johnson was talking about should we bench him, and the coaches are like, are you freaking slow, or what are you talking about? So we kind of knew this, right? But he's lost confidence in Rodgers' ability to lead the team to the playoffs. We all are with you. Discussions of benching or placing him on IR have surfaced. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know to what degree. I don't know who the discussions are being had with or what. That's apparently a thing. Possibly putting him on IR, which I got to be honest, if he ends up on IR, if I'm in the league office, I'm running an investigation. Because you can't pre-plan to put somebody on IR and then they actually end up on IR. That's not what IR is. It's not just like a separate benching entity where we can just bench you but pretend we're not benching you because there's some other excuse. No, you have to actually be hurt. So if that dude goes on IR, I'd be launching an investigation immediately into the Jets. In fact, if I'm the Jets and I was planning on doing some shiesty stuff, I'm like, well, that plan's out the window. So much for that. Continuing, Rodgers' relationship with Johnson has been strained for months, and the locker room is aware of these tensions. And if that wasn't clear before, it certainly was as soon as we heard about Johnson wanting to bench him. Obviously, these two are not seeing eye to eye, are not best friends. And again, I got to look Rodgers in the eye a little bit and be like, so let me hear from you again about organizations not treating people right. Can you run that by me about the Packers and how they are uniquely terrible in dealing with people? I'm just curious because you're over there with the Jets right now, and it seems like these guys are going out of their way to do really terrible things, like unilaterally firing the head coach who was not responsible for doing anything wrong and shipping him out, and then bringing somebody else in while at the same time talking behind your back, Mr. Quarterback, about we should bench him because he sucks. And now there's apparently talk that he wants to bench you or, well, we'll get to it, something worse. Some within the Jets organization believe Rodgers is no longer the same elite player he once was, with his performance and health being questioned. So notice it says some within the Jets organization. So this is whoever is leaking this to Rossini is saying there are people, not people. There is speculation that Rodgers could be benched, placed on IR, or even cut mid-season, signaling the likely end of his tenure with the Jets. Now, I kind of walked through this a little bit. I would be shocked if they cut him. The biggest reason, I mean, we're past the trade deadline, so if you do, you're an idiot because you had an opportunity to trade him. But even beyond that, why not just hold on to him? Maybe he's untouchable with that contract. It's entirely possible. There's a lot of money on it. I haven't looked at what would be stuck with the Jets and whatever. If the Jets end up eating most of it because it's in bonuses and whatnot, then he is I shouldn't say very, but he's probably tradable. In which case, go get you some compensation, see if you can save face at least a little bit. Maybe you can trade Dallas for Dak. They seem to really hate that guy. You can take on Dak and his contract, and Rodgers can go play with McCarthy, and they can ride out their last year together because McCarthy's about to get fired also. Maybe they can ride out into the sunset and retire together. They can trade for Devontae. It'll be a part of the package for Dak. Rodgers and Devontae for Dak, and then, the contracts and all that. I don't know. Who gives a crap? Bottom line is cutting would be... I mean, look, it's the Jets. They're complete morons, maybe, but I don't think so. I'll be honest. I would be surprised if they even bench him, but it is what it is. And again, would I feel bad? No. Because I'm looking Rodgers dead in his eye and going, what up, bro? How's that grass is always greener thing going for you? Dude reads all these books and knows all these little quotes, probably got a bunch of them tattooed on him. He doesn't know the basic ones. Despite the turmoil, Rodgers reportedly still wants to play in 2025, but is unlikely to do so with the Jets. Now, this is obviously going to lead to a ton of speculation. Where's he going to go? A lot of people worried about the Vikings. I don't know. I don't know if Rodgers would go to the Vikings. Maybe he would. Some people don't think he'd want to do that. I mean, despite the Packers, I don't think he wouldn't. But there's also a very real question of why bother? Sam Darnold, which is crazy, not only because Rodgers is a Hall of Famer and Darnold has been a perennial bust, but because Darnold used to be a Jet, Darnold is playing better than Rodgers right now. Arguably, let's just say. So why? Why do it? Why deal with the fact that the guy's 500 years old, the fact that teams tend to fall apart all around him, the locker room thing kind of falls apart. He's way too pushy. He's going to try to tell everybody how to do their job. He's going to boss around the coaches. He's going to boss around the GM. He's going to try to get his way, and the Vikings don't want to deal with that. Why would you? Plus, you got a quarterback waiting in the wings. I mean, that's the only argument you can make is maybe he can learn behind him kind of the way Jordan Love did, but I don't know. I don't know that that's the best situation. Beyond that, I don't know that I care anymore. I don't know that I'm that scared of Rodgers. There was a time when it was like, man, him leaving and then coming back, he's going to haunt us. I'm watching the guy and going, meh. And if he can't get it done with that team, with Devontae and Garrett Wilson, I mean, yeah, he's got a good number one receiver, but that's about it. With a lesser run game and a lesser defense, arguably. I mean, Vikings defense is playing better. They don't have the talent. I don't know. I don't know. I think there's a very good chance if things go south that he leaves because, I mean, come on, man. It's getting out of control with this. Could certainly speculate where he could end up, but the bottom line is, despite a real big cap hit, which again is hilarious that the Jets paid to basically be in the same nightmare situation the Packers are in, where it's like, we got to get out of this contract. We want to move on from this guy, but it's such a big cap hit, and it's scary because we don't know what's on the other side. The Jets paid to be in that situation. They paid actual money and draft capital for 1 year of him being injured, 1 year of him being terrible and the team being worse than it was with Zach Wilson, and then the next year trying to get out of the contract with Rodgers where you have to take a gigantic cap hit. Wow. And again, other teams are looking at that going, that trade-off didn't super work. The Packers wanted to move on. We all thought that they were stupid. Turns out maybe that was a good decision, and the Jets made a terrible decision to get Rodgers. Who's raising their hand to be like, I want the next turn? And you think, what? Do you think Rodgers is going to take like a $30 million 1 year contract? He's not doing that. The guy who's part owner of the Milwaukee Bucks, the guy that was potentially going to be the host of Jeopardy, the guy that's been offered like a VP spot next to RFK, like that guy is going to lower himself to backup quarterback status? I don't think so. But we'll see how it goes, man. If things keep spiraling, we know Woody Johnson likes to just shoot from the hip. He may just have Rodgers benched. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work out, but it's going to be real interesting watching the Jets and seeing if they can turn it around, and if they don't, how trigger happy that owner is going to be with stuff, because he fired a coach and that was stupid, and then he fired a GM, and I'm not sure that was the best decision. What's next? Other than cleaning house and kicking, and then you got Devontae. Poor freaking, I shouldn't even say it. I don't care. Devontae chose to left too. Screw that guy. He went to the Raiders. That was a disaster. Oh well, sucks to be you. Then he's going to go win a Super Bowl with his boy Rodgers, and that's a disaster. And then Rodgers and your offensive coordinator are going to get shipped out of there, and you're stuck with whatever scraps are left. Oh, my Lord. I tell you what, man, you can be skeptical of the Packers all you want, but there have been a couple guys that chose to leave thinking that they were going to show the Packers, what they're missing, and that has not gone well at all. Anyways, let's take a break. We'll come back. Got a couple things here with this Packers 49ers game, just a couple things that, interesting little this, that, or the other. And then I want to get into some of the games of interest for this week. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, so here is Mina Kimes talking on ESPN about this game. She brings up a couple interesting points about the complications that the 49ers are going to have, maybe some misconceptions about the 49ers and plug and play, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, here's what they had to say about the injury issues.
This is big news in terms of playoff seeding. So we bring in our NFL analyst, Mina Kimes, to talk about these Niners injuries. How do they pull one out against this Packers team with backup quarterback Brandon Allen and without their top defender in Bosa?
Arguably their two most important players. Starting with the quarterback position, huge loss, of course, especially when you've watched this Niners offense this year and seen how many tight window throws Brock Purdy has to make, how many third and longs he's in, how pass happy they are. It's not quite the insert any quarterback and they'll succeed offense we tend to associate with Kyle Shanahan. Though I will say, if there's one play caller in the league who I can point to and say, man, he seems to have success with any quarterback over a long period of time, it is Shanahan. So there is hope there. And, of course, with Christian McCaffrey back in the fold, the rushing attack as well. On the other side of the ball, that's a big injury. You saw last week when Nick Bosa exited the game against Seahawks, just so much different. It was so much easier for Seattle to move the ball both on the ground and through the air. So they're going to have to find a way to get pressure against a very good Packers offensive line, perhaps consider blitzing more. That's something that Jordan Love has struggled with this year.
Yeah, the pressure rate of the Niners when Bosa's not out there drops in half. Their sack rate is 2%. Both of those would be worst in the league. Mina Kimes joining us with the latest surrounding those Niners injuries.
All right, so a couple things that were brought up there. Mina, first of all, she kind of mentioned what I mentioned. It's Shanahan. He's a talented guy. If he can find a way to make whatever talents they have work, he's going to go ahead and probably find that, do that, implement that. But there are still issues. There are issues with the fact that this is a very timing-based offense with a quarterback that is very skilled at playing in a timing-based offense that maybe this new guy, Allen, is not quite so much. And that she also brought up that this offense is not necessarily as plug-and-play as you may think for that reason. You have to have the right pieces. And then I thought the last part was the most interesting. Obviously, we know that not having Bosa is a big deal. He's very good against the run. He's also an incredible pass rusher. I did not realize that when Bosa's not on the field, they're dead last in the league in pressures. Now, he's probably not on the field, or he's usually on the field, so it's potentially a small sample size when he's not, but that is a pretty astonishing statistic from wherever they're getting that. Granted, if it's ESPN statistics, I don't trust them, but it's a big deal, no matter how you slice it. Here is, and again, just highlighting where we're actually at with the 49ers, right? This is not necessarily the team that we've been facing 100 different times. This is kind of where everybody's at right now with this team, kind of approaching it the way we all are of, come on, it's the 49ers. But at the same time, at this point in the season, you go, I don't know.
You know, I've been very bullish on the 49ers preseason and throughout this entire season to say, just everybody take a beat.
Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd.
They should be much healthier as a team and getting healthier. They'll get McCaffrey back. Ayuk's gone, but there's going to be enough there for them to start putting their foot in the ground, gaining momentum, and becoming the proverbial team you don't want to face once the playoff hits. And I am now entering week 12 very concerned about that glass being half full. Kittle got sat yesterday with a hamstring injury, and Nick Bosa couldn't finish the game with what they're calling an oblique or a hip injury. Mm-hmm. And I sure, those hamstrings are dicey. I hope we see Kittle back real soon. I don't know when we're going to see Bosa back over something like that, where he could not finish a game.
I should have mentioned this. This is 4 days ago, 5 days ago, whatever. So this is before they're fully aware of the extent of the injury issues.
And when he got hurt, he got Geno Smith down on the ground when he got hurt. And I am concerned that the offense is missing too many parts, or has to play perfectly enough to get enough points to overcome a defense that isn't getting healthy. And they're not good enough to overcome that stuff. That's what it's looking like right now. And I am genuinely concerned for the team moving forward. They are in a mosh pit in this division. And the problem is they've lost 2 games at home in this division. They're 5-5, like the Rams, and they're 5-5, like the Seahawks. And no one's running away with it. The Cardinals are 6-4, but the Cardinals and now the Seahawks have won in San Francisco. And the Rams held serve against San Francisco at home as well. Remember everybody was banged up in that game, both sides? Missing stars all over the place? I'm officially genuinely concerned about the San Francisco 49ers, and I have not said that once in the first 3 months of the season. If I had to place a wager, I'm not allowed to do that sort of stuff, a mental marker on this division, I would choose Arizona right now. They're playing the most consistently. They've got enough of a momentum swing. And the Rams, 1 minute, get back to 500. The next minute, have a dreadful offensive performance and mistake-prone performance at home against the Dolphins team ripe for the taking. Then they come back around and take on New England and put the bang thing on them in the second half to the point where a comeback for New England couldn't be fully mounted. So the Rams can actually put the pedal to the metal and win this division too. The Seahawks, I'll tell you, man, Jackson Smith and Jigba's becoming the one there. Mm-hmm. 11 targets, 10 catches, 110 yards in week 11. He's got 17 catches for 290 or 2 touches over the last 2.
All right, we don't need to elaborate on everybody else in the division, but you get the idea, right? I think it's time to shift our focus. It's time to start looking at other teams. It's time to maybe stop saying, they're going to come back and smash everybody. And again, this is before they realized Brock Purdy was going to be out. So it's not good. By the way, the interruption by Colin Cowherd. This is same day, by the way. So we're talking, Monday or whatever, the next day, evaluating everything. But here is what Colin Cowherd had to say.
All right, this game's a corner TV game for a lot of people, but you have so much insight to the Niners. Seattle, Geno Smith runs it in with 12 seconds left. San Francisco loses to the Seahawks 2017. Jawan Jennings, that third quarter drive was huge. He's you can tell the players just love him. The fans love him.
Great player.
But San Francisco is now 5-5. Arizona looks more dynamic offensively. The Rams look like they're much better defensively with all those young defensive players. Seattle, I like Seattle's roster. I think they're a quarterback away from being really, really interesting. Well, I wrote this down during the game. The Niners had another iffy special teams day. John, they just don't feel special. They don't feel like Philly, Detroit. They don't feel like Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo. They feel much closer to Houston and not quite as good at quarterback. I mean, that's what I wrote on my sheet twice. First,
think about that for a second. They're not as good as Houston, who we beat, and they don't have as good of a quarterback. Okay, so it's like Houston if you got rid of the quarterback and put in some third-rate backup. That sounds good to me.
They just don't feel special.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Colin, they don't feel like a playoff team. I think today the playoffs say sayonara because
remember, prior to realizing there's no Bosa, there's no all the guys that we listed. It's not just Bosa and the freaking quarterback Brock Purdy, but it's mostly them and more. This is what they're saying prior to realizing that.
They've lost 3 divisional games. They're 1-3. They've lost all 3 teams.
John, listen to this. They have the second worst scoring defense in the final 2 minutes of the second half in the league. And they brought Christian McCaffrey back. He's got no TDs in 2 games. So there's is the offensive line an issue to you?
Yeah, I mean, their right tackle stinks. And they're huge on drafting skill guys over offensive linemen. Kyle and their offensive line coach said as much over the last 6 months. They draft Ricky Pearsall in the first round, who I like Ricky Pearsall. A lot of offensive linemen there. When your offensive line, Trent Williams, one of the greatest players of all time. Last time I checked, he's 36 years old. I thought today was on Kyle. He challenged 2 plays in the second half, failed on them both. When it was pretty clear, that's not getting overturned. And then they had the ball with an opportunity to basically ice them out, not give the ball back to Seattle. Seattle has all 3 timeouts. So they run the ball, they get stuffed, call timeout. 2nd and 9 or whatever. Okay, they went for the kill shot. And Jawan Jennings looks like Terrell Owens meets Jerry Rice out there today. And he runs a play to ice the game to Deebo Samuel, who does not quite look like himself right now, looks slow, not even remotely close to being open. Purdy airmails it over his head. Thank God, it might have got picked. And then they just had to punt, and then obviously Geno drives them right down the field. The other thing is, Kittle today, who's having a fantastic season.
Great.
He's an older player. He's banged up. Can't play. Hamstring. Bosa, who's probably their best player.
Banged up.
Dealing with his hip pointer, can barely stay on the field. You can see him grimacing like he's in a lot of pain. I mean, this is just a devastating, tragic event, but Charvarius Ward's daughter passes away. He's gone. They're missing a ton of top players. Ayuk's on the couch with his leg up. You just can't overcome. You're talking, there's a lot of money worth of player, Colin. And Kyle then has a little bit of an off day, and it just snowballs in their division now. One thing you'd say about the NFC West, it's pretty competitive. If Seattle's your worst team, and technically the Niners are now, that's a pretty good worst team.
That's also worth mentioning because, we constantly talk about 9 to 10 wins gets you in and all that stuff. It's really not about that. Obviously, it's about where you stack compared to everybody else. That's what makes it so tough for us is winning the division. I'm not going to say it's out, but it's going to be a big uphill battle even worrying about that. So really that just means you're fighting for one of 3 spots, and there's a lot of teams that are winning there. The 49ers are trying to win their division. They're kind of in a tough division. It's not NFC North, but you're looking at a team right now that is struggling, banged up, everything else. And also, you got to compete with the Cardinals who are playing well. You got to compete with the Seahawks that are playing well. You got to compete. Rams aren't super great, but whatever. There are a lot of uphill battles to overcome here, and you can hear. I mean, even this is just the national media. Usually they're like, oh, it's they can't stop praising teams that are generally good. For them to even start coming around to all this and being like, I think they're kind of just not very good and they're going to miss the playoffs and that's it, kind of says a lot. Not to mention what the local people who are losing their minds are saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I said this is
it's over. They put their next two games with the Packers and the Bills on the road. Like they're not going to the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think these windows in a sport that it's like a little like hockey. You've got a regulated level of violence. Guys, older players get hurt. One of my big predictions this year was San Francisco, I felt last year, peaked, and you would see a slow regression. And I think you're seeing it. I don't think they're special defensively. I don't really blame it on Brock Purdy. I think if I was John Lynch, I would have attacked the offensive line. It was a good year for tackles. Don't
need to speculate much beyond that, but yeah, I mean, you start to question a lot of stuff, and this is, we do this as Packer fans too. You get all excited, everything's great, you think your team is basically perfect and primed for a Super Bowl, and you get a few losses, and you start taking a second look, and you're like, actually, now that I look at it, my team sucks. Maybe the Packer fans shouldn't be doing that. I'm just saying we know how that goes, and I think they're going through that, and everybody's kind of doing that, including the national media, going, well, now that I think about it, as good as Trent is, we probably should have looked at some help there and, look at the right tackle's not good and all, certainly should have done offensive line instead of another wide receiver when you have 70 of them. And as much as we thought Kyle was the greatest coach of all time, now we're starting to second guess it, which you probably shouldn't, but still, that's what happens. All of a sudden, instead of only noticing his genius, we only notice the mistakes. That's where they're at. So there is sort of this competing thing in my head where, as caller said a few days back, this is a talented team that basically their playoffs are on the line. They're an animal cornered, and that makes them very dangerous. You got to wonder to some degree, especially with having no Bosa and no Brock Purdy, how many guys, as much as you want to believe that they're going to fight. I think a lot of whether a guy shows up or not is not intentional. It's not like players are just like, I don't really feel like trying. They just don't have it within them. It's sort of a subconscious thing. How many of these guys are subconsciously broken? You hear him talking about Debo, like, yeah, Debo just looks slow. I don't know. He kind of looks stupid to me. I don't know. It's not impossible that the news was devastating enough to doesn't have to be the whole team. Half the players just decide, we're cooked, bro. Here is Brian Baldinger on 95.7 The Game just talking trash about the 49ers' ability to run without having their tight end. Just bottom line, he's a crutch.
They're building a run block without George Kittle is horrible. They played Jalen Moore as the second tight end. Saubert, Moore, they were terrible on Sunday. I showed 8 McCaffrey runs where he went for 2 yards or less. And honestly, they were horribly blocked plays. They've been running the same 5 plays from different formations and different motions since Kyle's been there. And they couldn't execute at the point of attack.
This is not how we hear anybody talking about a 49ers team or a Kyle Shanahan coached team, especially for that matter. Just about how poorly same 5 plays, nobody can do anything. Everybody's making the 49ers seem like they're the worst coached, laziest, dumbest team in the world that can't do anything. It's really weird. Here's Baldy on that same radio show talking about their defense.
They don't look like there's a single threat out there to get to the quarterback from any position, including Leonard Floyd. They don't look like they have anybody that can beat one-on-one pass protection right now.
Here's a clip of him talking about the Packers, but it's interesting, first of all, to hear his perspective on how the Packers defense operates, but also just essentially saying, look, I'm sorry to tell you, 49ers, but this new style of defense that the Packers have is kind of specifically designed to take away what it is you want to do.
They're doing a good job. They press their receivers. They rob the middle of the field with Xavier McKinney. They have 3 safeties. They're all really good. Evan Williams. It's just going to be interesting because you're talking about attacking the middle of the field. Well, that's what they want to take away. And they're going to force your receivers to beat tight man coverage, and they're going to rush a 4-man rush. So You're going to have Rashawn Gary out there, some decent pass rushers. But this is a game where the receivers have got to win. You know, whether it's Pearsall or, I don't know, if Kittle's back or whatever. I'm going to be up there announcing the game. I'm really looking forward to it. But, you know, at some point, you got to beat good teams. You know, I mean, if you're going to go to the postseason, you're 5-5. Everybody's sort of bunched up there in that division. At some point, you got to beat good teams. And it might as well start up in Green Bay.
And that's an interesting thing, too, as well, that I haven't done that we'll do once I go through just, you know, people just making fun of the 49ers. But if you actually look at the games that they played, I mean, the only game that you're somewhat impressed by is their win over Seattle, but it's hard to be impressed by wins in divisional games because divisional games are always weird. Okay, well, who else have they beaten? Coming off their bye, they beat Tampa 23-20. Tampa right now is a 4-6 team. They beat Dallas in a complete tailspin. That doesn't impress me. They beat New England, who's a complete joke, and they beat the Jets week 1. That's it. The Jets, the Patriots, a divisional win to a team that they just lost to. Dallas and Tampa. Those are their only wins. They beat Tampa, by the way, by only 3 points. They beat Dallas, a complete disaster of a team, by 6 points. The wins prior to that were a little bit bigger, but you're talking going all the way back to, week 4? Or no, Seattle also, week 6. If we're going to say they got to beat good teams, the only good team they beat as far as teams with a winning record, again, is Seattle. And as I said, not massively impressed by divisional wins. They played Seattle and lost. They played Kansas City and lost. They played Arizona and lost. They played the Vikings. They lost. They played the Rams. They lost. But let's go through this now. So the 49ers this season, they are 4-0 when their offense has scored 30 or more points. When their offense doesn't manage to get to 30 points, they are 1-5. Think about how crazy that is. Think about from an offensive standpoint, you're sitting there looking at your defense going, are you freaking serious? If I don't score 30 points, we're going to lose? They're 1-5 when the offense doesn't score 30 points. That's where we're at right now. That's this top-tier defense. Here's something else that I just kind of came across. Again, just kind of throwing stuff out there. I mentioned the whole thing with McCaffrey and how it's not actually going all that well. Maybe he's just going to pop off this week because he's fully healthy, whatever. I don't know. But here is the Krug Show. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's a 49ers podcast. Here is them talking about, this is a larger context to this, but it's an interesting note within that, about the running game with and without him.
Here are the facts. The Niners rush EPA weeks 1-8, 10th best in the NFL. The Niners rush EPA since McCaffrey has come back, 21st in the NFL. They had a top 10 run game. They added the reigning offensive player of the year, and somehow the net difference has been negative. I asked Shanahan this week, I'm like, hey, could you play Christian with Guerrero? Could you play Christian with Mason? And he's like, oh, 2 running backs? And I thought he was kind of saying, oh, running back, fullback. So I'm like, no, I mean, you could flex one of them out. And he's like, oh, you mean so like using 2 running backs at one time? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, well, you know, we've done that and we might do that. I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, okay, you can have fun at my expense and kind of joke around with me.
Right.
It's fucking week 12. Your wide receiver core is totally banged up. You happen to have 3 starting caliber running backs. Guerendo's a game breaker. Mason was like 3rd in the league in rushing. And you just brought McCaffrey back. And all I'm saying is get your best fucking players on the field. Here's the truth. The Niners EPA per rush, or rush EPA weeks 1-8 was 10th. Their rush EPA in the last 2 weeks with McCaffrey back is 21st.
Yep.
Why has bringing McCaffrey back hurt the Niners run game? And what's the answer here?
I'm totally with you. I don't buy what Kyle Shanahan said. And on top of that, I want to see more creativity. Kyle Shanahan is looked at as a creative offensive mind, yet they're not.
So just take piecing this together here. First of all, even 49ers fans don't disagree with my assessment on the run game. Beyond that, here they are again, really questioning, how creative are you really? I mean, we're doing the same static bull crap over and over again. You got banged up receivers. You want to do like 2 running backs or whatever, and the reporter basically just gets laughed at. I'm sure they don't like specific suggestions of, hey, have you ever thought about running this play? But the bottom line is, from their perspective, this is a stagnant offense that's not using its best players from a coach that doesn't know what he's doing. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what they're saying.
Doing anything creative. And I'm not buying what John Lynch had to say. There were long drives and not an opportunity to get other players the football. I broke down the touches against the Buccaneers and the Packers for San Francisco on the show yesterday. And McCaffrey, first game back off bilateral Achilles tendonitis, he gets 13 carries for 39 yards. Debo gets 3 carries for 14 yards. The running plays for him haven't worked the last couple of years. Jordan Mason was top 5 in rushing yards before McCaffrey came back. Against the Buccaneers, he got 1 carry for 5 yards. Isaac Guerendo got 1 carry for 0 yards, and that touch came in the red zone. You're thinking, okay, maybe they're going to give Jordan Mason the ball a little bit more, and Isaac Guerendo, he's going to be more involved against the Seattle Seahawks. Christian McCaffrey, 19 carries against Seattle, 79 yards. Jordan Mason, 2 carries for 13 yards. Debo Samuel, 1 carry -1. Isaac Guerendo didn't get a touch. You're telling me, John Lynch, that there weren't opportunities to get the other players the football, yet McCaffrey had 19 carries for 79 yards? It doesn't make sense. You have to manage the workload for McCaffrey. John Lynch even said, he's getting close, but he's not that guy right now. And he's coming back off.
And to their defense, he's not that guy right now. And, sorry, that's distracting. He's not that guy right now. And also, he's coming back from an injury. Why would you not manage his work? But again, this is a desperate 49ers team that's like, oh, thank the Lord, we got our guy back. Give him the ball every single time. See if he can bail us out. That seems to be the extent of it. It's not great. But anyways, look, all that to kind of give a picture of what they're going through right now. Because we get in our own little bubbles over here. Even when it comes to like the Lions and the Bears and all that stuff, we have a vague understanding. Like, oh, crap, they're doing well. You look at the score, like, oh, crap, they won. That sucks. Whatever, we'll get them. Whatever the case is, I think we're completely out of the loop when it comes to the 49ers. We look at it and go, oh, here comes the 49ers again. We say, just so you're aware, this is where they're at right now. This is what the national media who's been to some degree covering the team is talking about. This is what people who cover the team are talking about, to the point where they are beyond frustrated with the head coach, his attitude, his play calling, everything. So, like I said, playoff game, dogfight, all that. But beat this team. Beat the team. That's it. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, folks, so let's go ahead and run through the games that we got. Again, we're in a battle, not just against ourselves, but against all these other teams. It's a big one for us up against the 49ers, as we already talked about. We'll look at, and I'll use NFL.com because they have all the teams. They have, again, slightly different numbers. They have the 49ers, even if they win, just at 46%. And again, all this is fake, because what the percentage is not only what happens to you, but what happens to everybody else. The Seahawks Arizona game is a big one for the 49ers. Philadelphia Rams will impact what happens. They can lose and be at 25% if everybody else loses. But all right, here are the games. Carolina, Kansas City does not matter, other than if Carolina could find a way to beat that team, it would be the greatest. Not the greatest thing. There's a lot of great things that could happen this week, but boy, would that be splendid, wouldn't it? It's not going to happen, especially coming off a loss. They don't usually lose 2 in a row, and this is just going to be a vicious beating. They're going to win by 70, but whatever. Minnesota, Chicago, I briefly talked about it before. I hate to do this to you. We absolutely are rooting for the Bears. That's kind of just all there is to it. You say, well, I don't want the Bears to catch up. If they win, they have a 2% chance of getting in the playoffs. Now, I guess you could produce some nightmare scenario where they go to 5-6 and we lose and we're at 7-4 and somehow they end up ahead of us. I really, 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 really doubt that. The Bears are out. They're done. Their season is over. And so we're hoping that little spark that they had continues and they go on to beat the Vikings. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, the Vikings are not on one of those lists of most impactful games. But you know how you end up on a list like that? If they lose like this. So if they're at 95%, if they win, they go to 98. If they lose, they drop to 90. It's not that impactful. However, next week, it becomes much more impactful. Why? Because you went from 8-2, which is almost a shoe-in, to 8-3, which is less of a shoe-in. And if you lose that game, then it becomes super serious. You see what I mean? So we want these guys to start showing up on those lists. And the way that happens is they start losing. Because then they go from shoe-ins to, it's a little bit iffy. And so again, remember, we've got the 4 teams in the division that are locked in. Now, of course, you still want the Lions to lose because there's a chance that we're only 2 games behind. It's not impossible, despite the fact that they have the frickin' Colts. And I don't know the next time that they're going to play a tough team. Maybe not this entire year. Maybe they won't have a difficult game the entire freaking year. I don't know how this works. Anyways, hoping for a little opening there. But otherwise, if we assume that for the most part, you know that these 4 spots are going to be taken and we're unlikely to get into any of them, then we're really just looking at these last 3 spots. And so we're trying to keep pace or outpace everybody else. And right now there is a pretty sizable gap. You've got the Vikings at 8 wins, the Packers and Commanders at 7, and then it drops down to 5 wins as the next best team. So that's kind of what we're up against here. So again, the Lions are facing the Colts. Obviously, we want the Colts to win. That's a no-brainer. It's not going to happen. The Eagles, who have the number 2 spot, are facing the LA Rams. Now, I'm kind of torn on this. My initial thought was I want the Eagles to beat the Rams, and the thought process behind that is I want to keep that gap wide. All right, we have 7 wins. The Rams have 5 wins. I don't want them to get to 6 wins because now the gap is closing and our odds of getting kicked out are increasing. The other way to view this, though, is the Commanders are 7-4. So if let's say the Commanders go and win and they go to 8 or whatever, the bottom line is there's still a possibility we can be competing with the Eagles because there's 2 teams right now that are real hot in the NFC East. So really, I guess the way I'm trying to think about this is when it comes to the NFC East, the NFC West, and the NFC South, there are 3 teams that I don't care about. They can have 40 freaking wins. It doesn't matter. What I am concerned about are the teams that are in the wild card. And the reason I'm worried about the Eagles in particular is because there's actually 2 teams in the NFC East. So I'm tempted to want them to both lose because I feel like in a way we're competing with both of them. Now, if I know for a fact the Eagles are going to win the division, then I don't care and I want them to win. I guess another way to look at it is I hope the Eagles win and I hope the Commanders lose. But I mean, for example, if the Eagles did lose to the Rams and the Commanders go on to win, I don't know exactly what happens. You may have the Commanders in that number 2 spot there, and then we're up against the Eagles. So why would I be rooting for the Eagles to win? You get what I'm saying? Now, when it comes to the other divisions, I don't care. They're free. So when it comes to the Cardinals, even though they're winning the division, I 1,000% need them to beat the Seattle Seahawks because I don't want the Seattle Seahawks encroaching on us. They're 5-5. I don't need them coming in here. I want the Cardinals to win the division, and I want them to keep the Rams and the Seahawks and the 49ers at bay. That's all I'm trying. I'm trying to keep everybody else at bay. None of you get to jump on ship. 49ers, Seahawks, Rams, interestingly, all in the same division. They are the 5-5 teams. Everybody else is below that. Those are the teams that I want to be able to keep at bay. So, I'm rooting for the Colts to beat the Lions. I'm rooting for the Rams to beat the Eagles, but I'm really torn. I guess either way it's good. If the Rams do beat the Eagles, then, again, it's an NFC, it's a potential wild card team that lost. If the Eagles beat the Rams, it helps keep the Rams at bay. They drop to 9%. Their season is basically done, so we can kind of not worry so much about them catching from behind, and it just increases our odds of going to the playoffs because somebody has to take the spot from us in order for us to not be in the playoffs, and the Rams are more than likely not going to be one of those teams. The Falcons at the number 4 spot have a bye, which makes them entirely useless, so the NFC South has an opportunity to catch up. The Falcons only are at 6-5, but the next best team is the Buccaneers at 4-6, with the Saints at 4-7 and the Panthers at 3-7. So that even with a bye, there's really no chance of anybody even gaining much ground. Nobody can actually take the spot away because the best you can get is to 5 wins. And again, the Falcons are at 6-5. So go Colts, go I don't care, Rams or Eagles. I want the Cardinals to beat the Seahawks. I want the Bears to beat the Vikings, the Packers to beat the 49ers, Dallas to beat the Commanders. I want the Giants to beat the Buccaneers, even though they're both basically done. The Buccaneers at 4-6, they do have actually a 37% chance. I think it's because the NFC South is so bad. They got a chance of taking that. In which case, by the way, it doesn't actually matter as much because their 30% chance going up to a 50% chance of getting into the playoffs is irrelevant to me because there's a difference between winning your division and getting into the wild card spot. And strangely enough, usually the wild card spot is where bad teams are or teams with lesser records. You know, all the division winners are like the 12-win teams, and then you got like a 9-win sneaking in. This year, you got some bad teams winning divisions, and then you've got great teams in the wild card. So the wild card is way too competitive for teams like the Buccaneers. But still, it'd be nice for the Giants to just take them down a peg just to make sure. So rooting for the Giants over the Buccaneers. The Saints also have a bye. Talked about the Carolina Panthers. Their season is done, but it'd be nice if they could just take out the Chiefs for good freaking measure. Otherwise, it's all just AFC. Again, we talked about the Chiefs game. Bills are on a bye. Steelers, Cleveland already happened. Texans, Titans, Chargers, Ravens, Broncos, Raiders, Dolphins, New England, Bengals on a bye. I think that's about it. Jaguars on a bye. So they're all more or less straightforward. I won't argue with you if you want to choose to root against the Bears, I suppose, although I do think it's the wrong thing to do. And then again, Rams, Eagles, I'm pretty well torn. I think either way, we're in pretty good shape with that game turning out. But I got to get out of here. I got to go do Packernet After Dark and whatnot. So you guys have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.